Somebody's calling my name. Hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush. Hush. Somebody's calling my name. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. What shall I do? What shall I do? Somebody's calling my name. Somebody's calling my name. Somebody's calling my name. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. What shall I do? What shall I do? I'm so glad. I'm so glad. So trouble don't last always. Trouble don't last. I'm so glad. Trouble don't last always. I'm so glad. Trouble don't last always. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. What shall I do? What shall I do? Somebody's calling my name. Somebody's calling my name. Somebody's calling my name. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. What shall I do? What shall I do? Somebody's calling my name. Somebody's calling. Somebody's calling my name. Somebody's calling my name. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. What shall I do? What shall I do?
My message today is called The Prophets of Fear and the Gospel of Love. And I want to share two brief readings this morning on the subject of love and fear. The first from the first book of John, chapter 4, verse 18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. And the second poem the second reading is a poem by the late African-American poet Nikki Giovanni, who we lost back in December. And this is called Allowables. I killed a spider, not a murderous brown recluse, nor even a black widow. If the truth were told, this was only a small, sort of papery spider who should have run when I picked up the book. But she didn't, and she scared me, and I smashed her. I don't think I'm allowed to kill something just because I'm frightened. So there's a story that we Unitarians tell about our origins here in New England, the origins of our progressive religious movement. And it's a story drawn from the childhood of William Ellery Channing. Channing, who for many years was the minister of the Arlington Street Church down in Boston, is considered the founder and first leader of the Unitarian movement. The story goes that one Sunday morning when Channing was just a boy, his father took him to see an itinerant preacher, a rousing evangelist of the fire and brimstone sort. And true to his reputation, the preacher that Sunday morning really lit into his congregation, berating them for their sin, reminding them in vivid and even violent language that unless they repented and hurried into the arms of God, they would face eternal hellfire and damnation. Well, by the end of the service, the young boy Channing was terrified. The sermon had literally put the fear of God in him. But you know what it didn't do? It didn't put the love of God in him. Only the fear of God. And more than anything, the young Channing wanted to love God, wanted to be loved by God. And to his credit, even at this young age, Channing perceived that he couldn't both fear God and love God. That somehow these two feelings, fear, love, were incompatible. After all, can we honestly say that we love a God, or a person for that matter, if our love for them has been coerced by fear? What's more, Channing was a good student of the Bible. He would have known these words from the first book of John that we read earlier. There is no fear in love, John writes. Perfect love casts out fear. Channing took all of this to heart, and later when he himself became a minister and then led the Unitarian movement in New England away from Calvinism, he vowed two things. First, he insisted that any God who required our fearful obedience rather than our love was not worthy to be worshipped. It was an idol. Second, he vowed that as a preacher, as a religious leader, he would never use fear to try to bring people to the love of God. Those who use fear as a cudgel, these prophets of fear, they're false prophets, he said. The prophets of fear are false prophets. Now, just as an aside, the story of Channing's early religious development is remarkably similar to that of another sensitive young man who grew up in the church. The novelist James Baldwin was a child preacher in the Pentecostal tradition. But as his awareness grew of his own sexuality, he slowly discovered that he felt more scared of God than loved by God. What's more, one day Baldwin's pastor told him that his best friend from school, who happened to be Jewish, would face damnation simply for not being a Christian. Baldwin finally quit the church and came to an understanding of God very similar to Channing's. He wrote, "If the concept of God has any validity or any use, it can only be to make us larger, freer, and more loving. If God can't do this, then it's time we got rid of him," he said. To which I say amen. Right? Preach, brother. So what I'm trying to say is that built into the very DNA of our Unitarian faith are two instincts about fear. The first is a deep suspicion of the ways that leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, use fear as a tool to get others to fall in line. You could say we Unitarians have a kind of heightened spidey sense for the coercive use of fear. It's kind of like our superpower, okay? But second, and equally important, we know that it's important to pay attention, to be mindful of the movement of fear in our own hearts, and to take care that fear doesn't take up so much space in our hearts that it crowds out love. These two things, a mistrust of the public and coercive use of fear, and a mindfulness to our own vulnerability to fear, these are resources from our tradition that we would do well to turn to today and to rely on. Because, friends, there's a lot of fear in the air today, isn't there? I know I feel it in my own heart. And if you've been paying attention during Joys and Concerns these last few weeks, you've heard that fear is present among us here. Fear for the safety and well-being of the people we love. For our own well-being and safety. Fear that our job will be eliminated. Fear that our life's work will be defunded. Fear that our families or the families of those we know and love will be separated and deported. Fear that our nation is turning into something unrecognizable to us. And fear, most of all, that we don't yet know how to stop it or resist it. There's so much fear and anger and grief out there right now, out there, in here. If Channing were with us today, friends, he would have us ask ourselves, how much space is fear taking up in your heart right now? And how much space is left over for love? I've been thinking about this tug of war between fear and love in my own role as a dad. Before becoming a father, I thought that fear was the opposite of love. But then when my son was born, I discovered that I was really afraid all the time. Afraid for him. Afraid for what happened when he crossed the street or whether he'd get bullied in the playground. Get his little heart broken. Now that he's a teenager, I fear what it'll be like for him to grow up as a brown-skinned young man in this country. As the world becomes more unstable and violent, led by ruthless leaders, I fear the wars he might be drafted into serving. As the climate changes, I fear the state of the planet I'll leave behind for him. My love for him sometimes makes me afraid. Sometimes it makes me so afraid, it's hard for me to find a space to love him. And it was the love that made me fearful in the first place, right? I've noticed that when I let that fear for my son get the better of me, then it's hard for me to love him. For my son or for anyone else, fear can crowd out love. It hardens our hearts, makes them brittle, less open, less responsive to love. And that's why I've been repeating this mantra with you all lately, and you're probably sick and tired of me saying it. I've been saying, stay centered, stay soft, and stay strong. And that stay soft part means Don't let your heart become hardened. Don't let it be consumed by fear and anger and hatred. Stay soft means taking intentional steps to nourish and feed your connection to the people and communities that you love, to spend time with others and care for one another. Stay soft, friends, even means not hardening our hearts to the people we consider to be on the other side of this great political and cultural divide we find ourselves in. People sometimes ask, Rob, what do I do with my fear? Sometimes they try to deny it or repress it. Sometimes they think they can kind of heroically conquer it. I believe that the remedy for our fear is to have our hearts set on something stronger than fear, love, and to nurture that love. Yeah, we'll still be afraid from time to time, and that's okay. But if we stay close to love, our fear won't own us. But what about the leaders who deliberately use fear as a tool for coercion for their own political gain? What about the so-called prophets of fear? The prophets of fear play on legitimate concerns that folks in our country have about their security and their future in a time of great cultural and economic upheaval. Folks' concerns about safety and violence, about the loss of jobs, the growing wealth gap, the shrinking middle class. But rather than offer real solutions to these problems, they whip folks up into a frenzy of misplaced fear. They point fingers and find scapegoats. They divide us and turn us against one another. They demonize those who disagree with them. Like Channing's itinerant preacher, they pump up the volume so high on the fear, there's no room left for love, or solidarity, or compassion, no space left for a reasonable dialogue. And they do all of this with a callous disregard for the wrecked lives and livelihoods left in their wake. I've got to say that the President of the United States seems to have badly misunderstood one of the powers of his office. Well, maybe more than one, but I'm thinking of one in particular right now. In civics class, remember, we were taught how the president wields the power of the so-called bully pulpit, right? Right? The bully pulpit refers to the president's outsized ability to sway opinion simply because he's the leader of the free world, right? But this president seems to have missed the memo on that, or maybe he didn't go to civics class, because he has literally put the bully in bully pulpit, right? Right? Or rather, we, the American people, put that bully in the bully pulpit. Because let's face it, when you hunt down families who sought asylum from political violence, separate them and deport them, you're a bully. When you demean folks who've given their lives to public service, call them lazy, corrupt bureaucrats, and fire them without cause, you're a bully. When you cut off food aid to famine-stricken nations or withhold NIH funding for cancer trials just because you can and there's no cost to you, you're a bully, right? Right? And when you demonize vulnerable children who may be questioning their gender and make them out to be some kind of bathroom stalkers, you're an ugly, ugly bully. And I'm with Channing. I don't like a bully in the pulpit, okay? And friends, I'm thinking that our Unitarian spidey sense for the coercive use of fear should be off the charts right now, right? Here's what I'm feeling these days. If the president has his bully pulpit down in Washington, then I'm thinking that maybe we need to join with the rising chorus of voices from across this nation of people of faith and people of goodwill who are preaching a different gospel, right? He's got the bully pulpit, but we've got the love pulpit, right? Right? The bully pulpit and the love pulpit. You know, he's got the power, but we've got the love. And by love pulpit, I don't just mean the literal pulpit, right? I mean the sum total of what we do as a congregation. What's the mission? What does it mean for us to be the love pulpit? Well, let the love pulpit first and foremost be a sanctuary. A sanctuary for those whose lives have been made vulnerable by the bully pulpit. Right? A place of respite, as Nathan said earlier, a place of respite and care and sustenance. Let it be a sanctuary, but let it also be a site of resistance to the prophets of fear. And even more than resistance, let it be a place that bears witness to the world that we want to live in and that we still believe in. You know, someone said to me just the other day, and it really hit me when they said it. They said, Rob, these days I feel like the church is the only place where I can believe in love anymore. And I'm going to take that as our charge and our call, right? Right? I think that's our charge as keepers of the love pulpit. In a time of fear, let's be a place where people can continue to believe in the power of love. Let's infuse every humble act of care and service that we provide with that love. From supporting one another in our struggles, like we do here on Sunday mornings, to feeding the hungry in Harvard Square, to sheltering homeless youth, to organizing for justice. Look, in and of themselves, these are not extraordinary tasks, but they're important. They have dignity. And when we go about these humble, loving tasks with a sense of intention and purpose, with the awareness that we take these love actions and do them in the face of a rising tide of fear and mean-spiritedness, then they take on even greater significance because they point to the world that we still hope for, the world that we still believe in, the world that we labor for. So from this pulpit and within these walls, and whatever places we can reach beyond these walls with our power and our community and our love, let's resist fear. Let's side with love. And let's give people every reason in the world to keep believing in love. Amen. Amen.
There is freedom within, there is freedom without. Try to catch the deluge in a paper cup. There's a battle ahead, many battles are lost, but you never see the end of the road while you're traveling with me. Don't dream it's over when the world comes in. possessions are causing me suspicion, but there's no proof. In the paper today, tales of war and of waves, but you turn right over to the TV page.
Hey now,
Don't dream it's over. When the world comes in,
they come to build a wall between us.
we know that they won't win. Now I'm walking again to the beat of the drum, and I'm counting the steps to the door of your heart. Only shadows ahead, barely clearing the roof. Get to know the feeling of liberation and release. Don't dream